whoever you are, wherever you are, there is one tiny thing that you could do to make your life better. So if you believe it will never happen for me, one of these common statements, that's likely to become true. That's manifestation too, it's just negative manifestation. It kind of feels like nothing, 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 and then suddenly, oh, things are happening, things are changing, I'm getting the things that I want. Your brain will do quite a lot to stop you from taking risks. If you just observe nature, you see manifestation all the time. You see a flower growing from a bud into a fully formed flower, and then its petals starting to fall. You see trees growing, all sorts of things. And the other connection there is that creating the environment within yourself and around yourself to allow things like manifestation to happen. And that basically means, at the simplest level, that you set a goal. You say, this is what I want my life to be like, or this is a specific thing I want in my life. And then there's a process that leads that to potentially manifesting in the real world. But I do agree with one of those skepticism points, which is that you can't sit at home and think about it. So I've been really, really clear about saying that manifestation is not creating a fantasy and then waiting for it to come true with no action from yourself. So I actually renamed vision boards action boards, as if to say that, yes, create imagery that represents what you want, but then you have to be doing something every day to move yourself closer to that. Whether it's being healthier just so that your brain's in a better environment, or it's networking or dating or, saving money, whatever it is that's going to get you, let's say, the house that you want. A great example is people might say, of course I'd love a house in the Hamptons. But if that's not realistic for you in the short term, then you'll only reinforce the fact that you're failing at manifesting. So it's better to say, I'd like to be on the property ladder, and start there and then obviously build bigger. So in terms of the motivation, to make it really easy for people to understand, I called it magnetic desire, which is something that is so emotionally driven for you personally and aligned with, what's logically doable in your life and what your intuition tells you and what your creative brain can help you to achieve, that if you have magnetic desire for something, then, I always say if you follow your passion, you will be successful. But I'm mindful that that statement, and even your one of I just want to wake up and do what I love, are extremely privileged statements. So with manifestation, one of the criticisms is that, that's a luxury for people who already have more than what they need, and then they can say, oh, well, I would love, to do this or have this. And so I think what I've learned in where I have ever felt slightly defensive around that statement is that whoever you are, wherever you are, there is one tiny thing that you could do to make your life better. And it's the micro changes that build you up to getting to a point where maybe you can actually do something that you love rather than do what you have to do to put food on the table for your children. But having said that, if your ideas for what you want to manifest are things like, well, all my friends are getting married and having a family, so I want to get married and have a family, rather than I've really thought about what I want to do, and my passion and purpose might mean that I have to delay having a family, and that's okay. It's more likely to work out with the second one than the one that's kind of too guided by parental expectations, societal expectation, career, aspirations. So I do think people have to dig deeper for manifestation to, really work well. So there's two main sort of areas around that. One is the sort of 6 themes that I narrowed down from the 12 laws of attraction that I could explain with cognitive science, which is neuroscience and psychology. So when I first started that research, I saw that there wasn't even agreement over what the laws of attraction were or how many there were. So I thought, okay, let me distill this down to something that makes sense to me, and then see what we can do with it. So the first one is abundance, because one of the strongest gearings in the brain is loss avoidance. So to survive when we lived in the cave, we had to stay safe rather than take risk. Now, for most of us who are lucky enough, to live in the modern world and have basic safety around us, it's healthier for us to be willing to take risk. So you actually have to override that ancient wiring of the brain, which says, no, don't go and fly to London and try to have meetings with lots of different people who may not want to meet you. Stay in LA, because that's safer and you've got your community around you and you've got a big network. that is you overriding that part of your brain that might say it would just be easier for me to stay in LA. So it's as simple as that. It can obviously be a lot harder than that as well, but it's understanding that your brain will do quite a lot to stop you from taking risk. It's 2.5 times as strongly wired to avoid risk as it is to gain reward. It's about believing that there are enough resources out there for everyone. And that by, perhaps entering a new career pool or a new community of people, that it doesn't mean that you're likely to fail. If you've managed to be in an abundant state, because what that does in the brain is it moves the brain away from the fear and shame kind of states, which correlate with the stress hormone cortisol, to the love and trust and joy and excitement states, which correlate with the bonding hormone oxytocin. Now, when your brain is in that state, it's much more likely to take a healthy risk. You wouldn't do that if you thought, well, don't ask because he'll just shut you down. Then you would never ask anyone. But if you start a conversation and someone looks like they want to be generous and help you, then, you go into that oxytocin mode. But you need to be pushing yourself into that mode as much of the time as you can. So the second one is manifestation, which is believing that with your abundant resources, you can do things in the real world that mean, whether it's that feeling of I do what I love or it's an actual house, that you have it in your capability to make that happen. Because of course, if you believe it will never happen for me, one of these common statements, that's likely to become true. That's manifestation too, it's just negative manifestation. And it's important to say that both manifestation and the process of neuroplasticity, which I will describe in detail, which is how your brain changes to allow you to grow and grasp new opportunities, they both have a good side and a bad side. And the classic example of a bad side of neuroplasticity is obsessing over an ex after a breakup. Because what you're saying to your brain is, this is what people do. You trust them and then they leave you. And you just remind yourself of all the times that you should have seen the signs and then, all the times that it went wrong. That's also inducing neuroplasticity and potentially manifestation in your brain, because if you don't make a change after that, your relationship pattern will stay the same and you'll reinforce it further with more breakups and more, sort of choices of partners that aren't ideal for you. The third one is the magnetic desire that I already discussed, which means that it has to be really authentic to you, but also aligned in simple terms in your head, your heart, and your gut. But in the source, I talk about 6 ways of thinking, which are logical, emotional, physical, intuitive, motivational, and creative. So if you think of something that you want, and you ask yourself in 6 different questions, why do I want this logically? Why do I want it intuitively? And you can get a really good answer to those, then it's likely that, you will be able to manifest that. Then there's patience, which is to do with neuroplasticity. So until we had sophisticated scanning technologies, a lot of this work, cognitive science work, was all thought to be psychological rather than neurological. So it would kind of be like, oh, you're not mentally strong enough, you gave up too quickly. And it would kind of infer an intangible psychological weakness that is kind of your fault. And I think that's another criticism of manifestation as well, that if it doesn't work, then there's something wrong with you. If you understand that it's actually physical work, when you're changing something, when you're striving for something, you're actually connecting up neurons or nerve cells in your brain that weren't connected previously. You may even be growing new nerve cells from little embryonic, baby nerve cells that then connect up with ones that already exist. And you may also be adding an insulating coat around existing neural pathways to make them faster, to make them more efficient. So the patience piece is because a lot of hard work goes on. That feeling of I'm trying to manifest but nothing's happening? That's in the patience piece, because when you get to a critical mass of neurons that have created a new pathway that is stronger than the pathway you had before. So let's say it's just the things like that never happened for me pathway changes to a, well, actually, I've seen do it, so maybe it could happen for me pathway. That takes a lot of effort. But once you get to the critical mass of enough neurons, suddenly it feels like everything's easy and everything's manifesting. And I do feel like people have to get a taste of that before, at least once with a quick win, to have the courage to take it to the next level. The second piece is magnetic desire, which we've already somewhat discussed. But once you're feeling abundant, Then if you can be really aligned in your head, your heart, and your gut about what it is that you want, then that, that desire, that motivation will keep you going and, help you get the things that you want that you might have given up on. So there is an element of patience required, because this process of neuroplasticity involves neurons wiring together to form new strong pathways that are stronger than the pathways that you had before. And so that means that it feels like a lot of hard work is going on. Psychological work is physical work going on in the, pathways in your brain, but that nothing's changing in the real world. And there's a real tipping point where there's enough neurons in a pathway that certain new habits and behaviors or, being patient becomes easier. And it kind of feels like nothing. And then suddenly, things are happening, things are changing, I'm getting the things that I want. So if you put those three behind manifestation, then that is about priming your brain to notice and grasp opportunities in the real world that can bring you closer to the things that you want. It's exactly the same process as if you buy a new car, you suddenly notice that car all over, it's the same. So it's a brain priming process. So basically, we're overloaded with information constantly, and the brain has a natural filtering mechanism called selective filtering. And this relates back to what I was saying about if you leave your brain to its job of just, making sure you survive, it will filter out all those other things that you actually really want, but they're not essential to your survival. So that's why you have to make a list or make the vision board or remind yourself every day of what it is that you truly, magnetically desire, to put that to the top of the list for your brain. Because after selective filtering, it does selective attention. And that is noticing the red car or the Tesla or whatever it is that, you're noticing. So once you've filtered out the things that you don't want to notice, then you narrow it down to the things that you do want to notice. And then the third part is called value tagging, which is the brain actually tags those things in order of importance. And it does that in two lists. So it does it in a logical list and it does it in an emotional list, and that's where the magnetic desire is important. That's where you say, no brain, I don't want it in that logical order, I want it in this order. This is what is really important to me. This is what makes me feel alive. This is what makes me understand that I have a purpose for my life, and it's not just put food on the table, stay in your job, stay in your relationship. It's so much more than that. I would explain the process of manifestation that's underpinned by neuroplasticity, which is a 4-step process. Raise your awareness, focus your attention, do deliberate practice, and hold yourself accountable. And it starts with raised awareness. I always say that's 50% of the battle, because sometimes we don't really know why we're not doing the things we know we should be doing, or why we're self-sabotaging those behaviours. But instead of taking the supplements that would set my body up for good fertility, I'm going out partying because that's the way I think I'll meet a new partner. So the awareness piece comes very much from journaling or doing some proper soul searching and trying to understand why you're not doing the things that you could be doing, why some of the things that you're doing really easily, why are they so easy, how do they fit into your lifestyle so well, and really what it is that you actually want. Do you actually want to settle down and have a family? Or fine, if you actually want to be out partying, fine, just say that and do it, and be aligned and don't kind of do the thing that you want but pretend that you want something else. And a wonderful exercise for that is to place your hands on your forehead.
Okay.
And ask yourself logically, is this what I really want and why? Okay. And then write that down. And then take 5 deep breaths and put your hands on your heart and ask yourself emotionally, why do I really want this? And then write down the answers. Another 5 deep breaths and then hands on your belly. Intuitively, do I really want this? And again, write the answers down. And, if they're all aligned, happy days. If they're not, we might have a little bit of rethinking to do. That's the most important step. The second step is focused attention. So that is at least a month of just noticing what you're doing, what you're not doing in regards to moving in that direction. But it's kind of a data collection period, because what won't work very well in manifestation underpinned by neuroplasticity is just jumping into doing without being first. Taking, longer than a month if you need to get to the point where you feel like I have enough data about myself that when I act now, I'll be able to give myself really good feedback. So the third part is deliberate practice, and that is doing the things that you know you need to do to bring the goal into your life. At this third stage, this is where people could give up. And so the fourth part isn't really a stage, it's something like a theme or an umbrella over all of this, which is accountability. So how are you going to hold yourself accountable that you will actually see this through? By recording it in your journal and reading back over your journal and, continually reinforcing why I did this, why I didn't do it, what happened when it went wrong. It's easier to build up micro habits than to start the year or, your birthday or whatever it is with one big, this year I'm going to meet the person that I'm going to get married to. And